My name's Alan Hudson. I'm the Executive Director of Global Integrity. We're a 15-person organisation based primarily in DC, in Washington, DC, focused on governance and anti-corruption.
Because of COVID, governments are spending more than ever through stimulus packages and investing in healthcare. I know that Global Integrity does a lot of work on fiscal governance. How has COVID shifted that work?
One of the things that we've been doing is an initiative called Account for COVID, where we are working with a number of African organisations in Nigeria, in Kenya, in South Africa, in Mali, in Uganda, where we are supporting the efforts of those organisations to increase transparency and to track the use of COVID-related resources. Another thing we've been doing is working with partners with Connected Development and with Budget in Nigeria, as they've been trying to develop some work also on strengthening the capacity of civil society organisations to track the use of public resources relating to COVID. A third thing is we've put together a database led by my colleague Jorge Flores, put together a database, 350 resources in it, all tagged, which is pieces that have come out over the last few months on COVID, fiscal governance and anti-corruption. So we hope that that is a useful resource for other organisations and people to use to keep up to speed with what's happening and what is being learnt about fiscal governance and COVID.
In the media, we've seen a bunch of articles of procurement gone wrong here in the United States and in many different countries. Multi-million-dollar contracts for protective equipment that turns out to be faulty. What do you think motivates public officials to do procurement well and to do it in an open, integral manner?
Some, probably many, maybe even most public officials, are committed to doing their jobs in ways that serve the public. And so people like that who operate in that way with that level of integrity, I think have that intrinsic and internal motivation to do procurement in effective and fair ways. So I think the question really is about what can change the behaviour of people who are involved in the procurement process, who are operating in ways which line their pockets, or which line the pockets of their companies. Which is, it's in a way, it's the classic question in terms of anti-corruption. How do you persuade the powerful and the vested interests who benefit from corruption to change their ways, to help so that they're part of the solution rather than part of the problem? Either it's about building countervailing power that can hold people accountable and responsible for their actions and the ways in which they do procurement, or it's about trying to find interesting ways forward that produce win-wins, that can basically persuade some of the powerful and vested interests that it is in their interests, as well as the public interest, to operate in ways that are fairer and more effective.
I don't know if you share this impression, but my feeling is that 2005 to 2015 was kind of the golden era of governance work in the development field. It's when it felt that there was increasing democratic institutionalization, increasing political competitiveness in many countries. It really felt like we were going toward improving governance for development outcomes and deepening democracy. The past 5 years have not felt that way. There's been a lot of backsliding. I'm curious what you think, how COVID is likely to influence the next 5 years of the development agenda and governance as an aspect of the development agenda.
Two areas to look at. One is in terms of fiscal governance and corruption. And I think on that, things could go either way. There are certainly, massive amounts of resources being provided by governments and international organisations to countries around the world to try and address the challenges relating to COVID. That could go really, really badly and lead to massive increases in corruption and the misuse of resources, or it could go well if there are associated investments in the capacity of civil society organisations and governments to track and shape the use of those resources. And that could, this is pretty optimistic, that could usher in, better systems for the allocation and spending of public resources. The COVID crisis and the fact that different countries have taken different approaches, and different parts of countries have taken different approaches, provides an amazing opportunity for learning and for understanding, what different approaches have been taken to tackling the complex challenges of COVID. How have they worked out, and what can be learned from one country to another? So what can be learned from Sweden, where they've had more of an approach of herd immunity, and what can be learned within the US from different states within the US. And the most optimistic scenario is that the world's experience with grappling with COVID provides an example of how the world can leverage the power of diversity and learning to address complex social challenges. Basically, I suppose what I'm talking about in some ways is about positive deviance, about leveraging the power of positive deviance, and looking for countries or communities that have stumbled upon or crafted really interesting and effective ways of dealing with challenges, and then disseminating, not in a transplanting and best practice way, but disseminating evidence and insights from the experience of those countries and communities.
You mentioned the ability of countries to address complex social challenges through locally led learning and adaptation. I think it's been a surprise to many that the United States and the United Kingdom have not been able to deal with this complex social challenge of COVID and the response, as well as a lot of other countries. And so often in the global development sector, we think about what lower income countries can learn from higher income countries. So I've been really intrigued by this project that Global Integrity has been leading on Outside In. Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, so we've launched this series of blog posts called Outside In, which is international perspectives on governance challenges in the United States. And it is intended to stimulate and support just what you say, David, which is about bringing lessons from other parts of the world into the US. It builds on the Defending Democracy project that we were involved in for the last couple of years with the Sunlight Foundation and Transparency International, but is kind of more. It was partly came out of the Black Lives Matter protests and and a focus on racial justice challenges in the US, which are also governance challenges in some ways. And so far, we've had pieces written by Adnan, the colleague from Tunisia, along with Neda, the director of the Open Gov Hub, reflecting on the US, on challenges in the US from the perspective of Tunisia and the impact that protests made in Tunisia. And then we published a second piece yesterday, I think, from Hudson, budgets in Nigeria, and that piece was very much focused on racial justice and police accountability in the US, drawing from his experience and perspective from Nigeria, where there have been similar challenges. So we've been very pleased to do that. It's always very interesting and insightful, and a great opportunity for learning when we hear from colleagues from around the world, and when we turn our gaze on the governance challenges that are all too clear in countries like the US and the UK.